All right, we are right at 3 o'clock. So in respect for everybody's time, we will go ahead and begin. I want to say good afternoon and good evening to everyone. I am Johnny Reddick. I am the chair of the Noble Officer Safety and Wellness Committee. And welcome to our training on suicide awareness and prevention. As we move along, I'm going to give you some housekeeping things to think about relative to the chat feature. And if you have any questions that we might have time to be able to get to at the end of our panel discussion. But what I really want to make sure that I share and we focus on for this training is a reminder that law enforcement officers are exposed to traumatic and stressful situations daily, often resulting in cumulative negative and impacts on their mental health. Research has shown that officers are at a substantially higher risk for experiencing depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and burnout than the general population. In fact, nearly 1 in 4 officers have contemplated suicide at some point in their lifetime. We need to understand that distress and mental health symptoms are strongly connected to the risk for suicide, which is already an epidemic for law enforcement officers. The results are also important to consider from a public health perspective, and that's why we have this panel of professionals. We are hoping that you will have this opportunity to take part successfully, the ability to facilitate a comprehensive suicide prevention approach that requires your active leadership. And that's really key because whatever's being talked about here becomes knowledge and information. Unless you go back and you actually use it, that's where the difference will be made. So executives, command staff, supervisors, and other leaders, you guys have a critical role. So remember that. We also recognize that attendees that are here for this training may be experiencing something for themselves personally. So we want to be sensitive to that, and we're going to provide some additional resources for you personally, but also for those that maybe you lead or peers that you have that you work with, or even family members. It is particularly important to create an organizational culture that supports overall health and wellness and encourages help seeking to ask for help and strengthens that resilience. So today, our panel will address how law enforcement officers and organizations can help and get the help needed, and how to begin developing that continuum of care that is needed in organizations. Before I introduce the moderator, I'd like to acknowledge the appreciation from both President Brenda Goss-Andrews and our second VP, Jeffrey Glover. They are not able to be here for this training. They have conflicting events that are happening in the DC area, but this is an important topic and important training for Noble National. I would like to encourage you, as a reminder, to drop your questions and information in the chat. We have individuals that will be monitoring that and try to be responsive. And then also I'll indicate when I'm putting some resource information in the chat as well for links, which you can take screenshots of. You can use your phone to take a photo. And another one is you can cut and paste into a Word document if you're actually on your computer, which I often do when I'm in virtual conferences now in order to have those links and that information. So with that, I'd like to introduce your moderator for you today. And I'm going to read a little bit of her bio, which was pretty amazing and extensive. But I want to hit some key points because it's really important how pivotal this moderator is for this panel. Assistant Sheriff Tanzania Carter has over 25 years of law enforcement experience. She served 21 years with the Bay Area Rapid Transit District, which is better known here in our Western region as BART Police Department, before becoming Assistant Sheriff for the San Francisco Sheriff's Office in a department with over 1,000 personnel. Her educational background is in criminal justice and ethnic studies, and she is a recent graduate of the FBI NAA Session 282, and she is a lifetime member of Noble. With that, Assistant Sheriff Tanzania Carter.
Thank you so much, Chief Reddick, and thank you for this incredible panel of people who will give us so much information with this topic that we rarely talk about, that should be talked about more often than not. First, I want to introduce to all of you Roger Ruggie. Roger is a 20-year law enforcement vet or law enforcement veteran and a peaceful warrior. I love that. Roger is a credentialed law enforcement master instructor through POST, that's California Peace Officer Standards and Training. He has extensive training. He's a certified trainer in so many wellness programs that you'll hear from and hear about today. Roger also studies meditation with monks and monastics and manipulations of all different kind of religions and backgrounds that we'll talk about later today. And he's also a published author of the Warrior's Mantra and a co-author with Dr. Renee Thornton for Navigating Adversity. I have the pleasure of knowing Roger through Navigating Adversity. He has actually helped a lot of us at the San Francisco Sheriff's Office, and we'll hear more about Pathfinders and things that they do with that organization. We also have Ms. Cynthia Goss. She is with Emergency Management Expert. In 1995, Cynthia became the president of Catch a Falling Star Law Enforcement Assistance Program. She will discuss all the different programs of Catch a Falling Star. And she's also written many articles in different areas, not only in the United States, but Canada and abroad. She is frequently selected as a guest speaker internationally, and we'll hear more about her organization. And then we have Obinna Asante. He is the National Director of Training for Concerns of Police Survivors. We also know that to be COPS. And COPS has many different programs that we'll discuss today. Prior to COPS, Mr. Asante worked in law enforcement for over 11 years as a director at the Osage Beach Police Department, where there he directed the 911 center. So he has an eye on law enforcement and dispatch. And we're going to hear more about what is going on in the COPS programs. And then also we have Deborah Meter. She serves as a senior policy advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, also known as BJA, U.S. Department of Justice. And she's responsible for leading BJA's robust officer safety and wellness portfolio, the Valor Initiative, which brings me to retired Chief David Perry, who also has a key in Valor, but more so Safe Leo. And Safe Leo is the National Suicide Awareness for Law Enforcement Officers program. So as you can see, we have here collectively so much extensive information, knowledge, first base knowledge of what we're talking about today. And without further ado, I really want to get into this subject and start with Mr. Ruggie, because he has a story to tell that really talks to the crux of suicide awareness and training and resources and how he came about to be a part of Pathfinders. So if you do feel comfortable, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to Navigating Adversity?
Yeah, thank you, Sheriff Carter. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm happy to share this with you. I'm also going to go over a few statistics that I think are really critical to understand how we can actually impact suicidal ideation in the law enforcement culture. My journey started on an afternoon where I was in the traffic division of my department. It was the last 5 minutes of my shift after a 40-hour week. I was tired, and a call came out of a multiple vehicle accident with major injuries on the other side of town, right at commute hour. And so tired as I was the only traffic unit on. I rolled to that code 3. And as more and more information came in, the call started getting more and more serious, that there were multiple people, possible fatalities involved, etc. So my adrenaline is filling my body. I'm going faster. And as I get to the scene, I'm now in a heightened state of awareness. My heart rate is up. My elevated system is really hypervigilant. And I get out of my car and I am looking at something that I had never been prepared for. The extent of the crash scene was so massive that I didn't know what had happened. It was so big, I didn't know where to start. It was so massive, I thought maybe a small plane tried to land on the roadway because there were 8 vehicles involved, 15 people injured, and they were in various stages of shock. And I was one of the first people on the scene. So not knowing what to do and feeling overwhelmed, I ran to the car that was most damaged because I thought that's where I could be of help. And firefighters looked like they were really struggling to get the victims out of this car. When I went up to the car, and I'm going to spare you some of the graphic details out of sensitivity for our audience today, but when I looked inside, there were 2 girls in the back seat, and they were my daughters. So when I looked in and saw my daughters, I had to step back and I shook it off for a second, and I got my logic center working, and I said, wait a minute, my kids are home right now. They should be home. I don't recognize this car. That can't possibly be my children. But when I looked back in the car, it was 2 girls who were not my children. My mind had projected a perceptual distortion that in fact was my kids. It projected my worst fear. I was able to shake that off, but it cut a deep groove in my consciousness. Adding to this, I was on the scene for an additional 20 hours as we worked this incredible scene with 3 fatalities, including some of the children. Then over the course of the next 3 weeks, I investigated this accident, revisiting the horror of it over and over and over again. Flash forward 5 years, I'm now in a deposition. And in this deposition, for the civil thing, there are 18 attorneys in the room and a judge, and it's all civil. And they want my testimony to see who's going to win this thing. And the very first thing they ask me to do is look at a pile of photographs and identify each of the photographs, what I see in it. And you can probably already predict that the first photograph I picked up was that car. I literally left that room in my mind and went back and relived the entire event. That's called a flashback. And I lost the ability to even know that I was in that room anymore. I literally relived it in real time. Again, I heard the screams, I smelled the smells. When I came back to consciousness in real present time, I had 18 attorneys who were looking at me in various states of shock. I'm crying and I have no idea what's happening, so I just get up and walk out of the room. To everybody's credit, no one tried to stop me. And I'm really happy about that because I don't know what I might have been capable of in that moment, but I knew I was in serious trouble. So I called our EAP program. Now at that time, invoking the employee assistance program and seeing a clinical psychologist was a major problem. If anybody knew that you were doing that, you were automatically suspect that you couldn't do the job anymore. And so when I made my appointment to see my EAP provider, I wore a disguise. I drove around the block 3 times. I parked away and I ran into the building so I wouldn't be noticed. And what we discovered at that time was in the ensuing 5 years from that incident to when I had that moment in the deposition, my behavioral change had become significant. I began to disregard policy. I began to rush into danger. I began to jump calls for service. I began to disregard my officer's safety utterly. And this extended, excuse me, into my off-duty time as well, where I did high-risk behaviors like racing motorcycles on a racetrack, downhill mountain biking, full contact martial arts, anything to keep the demons at bay. But more importantly, I was also hoping that I would die. And I didn't realize that. I didn't consciously know it, but unconsciously, my behavioral shift was clearly oriented toward dying in a blaze of glory. Now, my department recognized this as well, and they decided to give me commendations and awards for becoming super cop. So no one was connecting the dots that I was in fact experiencing severe post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma. My psychologist told me that after 6 sessions, talk therapy wasn't going to get it done, and they wanted to do something that was experimental at the time. They didn't know how it worked, why it worked, or what the deal was with it, but they were getting good results. So they said, do you want to try it? Well, at that point in my life, I'd have tried anything. So I said yes. And I was one of the first people to experience EMDR, which is now a standard in the treatment of post-traumatic stress. After about 6 sessions, I felt more normal, more back to Roger, the guy who did good officer safety, was not trying to risk his life all the time. And I felt restored significantly. But an interesting aspect of that was I went for the one event, and surprisingly, 6 more came out that I hadn't thought about in years, but they were stored inside me, accumulating, waiting to be released. So fortunately, we were able to get to that as well and purge all that. Now, because that was experimental, got my mind thinking, well, if that outside the box thing worked, what else might be there? And that, Sheriff Carter, is what led me into studying with monks and monastics the advanced practices of meditation, learning subtle energy practices from martial arts masters, breath work, and all kinds of things that have opened up all these different doors. That ultimately led me to Dr. Renee Thornton and Pathfinder Resilience and her program, Navigating Adversity. For 30 years, I have been a mindfulness resilience practitioner, trainer, and coach in California and law enforcement across the country. But when I saw what Dr. Thornton had put together, I was really, really impressed, because she does not just offer a program that checks a box. She offers something that's scientifically validated. So let me give you just a couple of statistics about what she's up to, and then I'll take a pause there and see if any questions come up or if you have any clarification you'd like. To date, Pathfinder Resilience and the Navigating Adversity program has trained over 7,000 law enforcement professionals. And we've discovered some very interesting statistics. Each of the officers that goes through the training does a pre-training assessment to give us what we like to call a wellness scorecard, a snapshot of how the agency, the organization, and the individuals overall are doing. Here's what we've discovered in those 7,000 surveys. 1 out of 6 officers has depression. 1 out of 17 has anxiety. 1 out of 13 has compassion fatigue, and that's burnout with a secondary traumatic stress exposure. And then 1 out of 9 has post-traumatic stress disorder. Now that's alarming, but what's more alarming are the comorbidity factors that are often present. So for example, we're talking about these individual ideations here, and it's really difficult to deal with any one of those, but it is very rare for a person to just have one. In fact, they're often stacked, and here's what that looks like. Our research showed that 1 out of 29 officers have depression and anxiety. 1 out of 17 have depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And 1 out of 22 have depression, anxiety, PTSD, and compassion fatigue. Now that is a whole lot of trouble. And this is all the stuff that we have found prior to implementing training. But what gives me hope is what happens after the training. We do the assessment again, and here's what we've learned. After the training, only 1 out of every 67 officers is still experiencing a struggle with one of those things. And more incredibly, none of them report comorbidity factors still remaining. You heard that correctly. Dr. Thornton's research has shown conclusively that we can eliminate those comorbidity factors. So instead of dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, now it's 1, and we've reduced that to 1 in 67. How in the world is that achieved? Well, this program is awesome because you get a self-paced online learning that gives you a tangible experience on how to improve the 8 areas of wellness. And that's the issue that is most important. We raise each of those areas throughout the 8-week program. What's more important there also is that this program is 100% confidential, and we get everyone in the agency to do the program so that those divisions between the administration and the line that are often present, those lines become less divided. We start to come together, and now we have an opportunity to create true and lasting behavioral change. I'll tell you this, The stigma surrounding seeking help, that is a plague in a department. And in a healthy culture, it doesn't exist. That's our job. We reduce that footprint so that at the end of the day, everybody's on the same page and we have a culture that fully embraces wellness as their absolute foundation moving forward. So I'll pause there to see if you have any questions or comments.
No, you have got us thinking. I like when you say out of the box thinking, and you all are out of the box thinkers. I'll come back to you, Roger, but I want to go to Ms. Goss in regards to catching a fish, a falling star, because as you were talking about the different triggers and all of the different ways that people have the red flags that we in law enforcement, as law enforcement professionals, managers and supervisors, we may miss. People who really delve in like yourself will catch those red flags and understand they mean something different. And so I want to go to you, Ms. Goss, and tell us about what your organization is offering for those who do have triggers like we just talked about.
Thank you, Sheriff Carter, and us, obviously, Joni Reddick and Noble. It's a pleasure again. Catch a Falling Star emanated after working as a county EAP, and the exact same thing was happening, Roger. Everybody but the sheriff's office and correctional facility came to the EAP because there's nothing wrong with them. And again, the stigma that's attached and the fact that they don't feel safe, so they're not going to reach out. Unfortunately, my program began as a result of everybody else's trauma. And the program's name came from Catch a Falling Star, the star representing the actual badge and the officer falling for suicide. So they're asking, how do you save these officers? And it's like, you got to catch them before they fall. You got to get them before they become like Roger or Chris Prohut or any of these other. As we know, we have walking wounded everywhere, whether they have programming, don't have programming, choose to use it, choose to not use it. We have walking wounded, and the potential of them becoming a statistic increases greatly. So the program began out of crisis. So people would come to me in contract after a crisis. What can we do to be preventative in the future? So we started looking at obviously some of the research, some that Roger has, and I'm sure others are going to bring up information about research that they have accumulated, working with Dr. John Violanti, who's been a colleague and a mentor of mine. You know, we were working on, different researches that he's brought up and that he's published. And some of those things that he brought up for the suicide factors that they were putting together, some of the things that most had in common were, number one, a minimum of 12 years of service on the job, a lot having some type of a rank outside of a rank and file officer, that they experienced some significant loss of their job, separation, termination, demotion, wife, girlfriend, both. As you know, stuff happens in this world. And then alcohol or substance abuse played a role as well. So when we started looking at some of the statistics that Dr. Violanti was bringing up, we started to look at, well, what can we do about it? We know we have a problem, but now what can we do about it? And so when I began to work with our police agencies and the academies, we asked if we could come in. And when I started out, I was given 15 minutes. 15 minutes out of their whole recruit, 26 weeks, 15 minutes. I'm lucky I can get my name out, give you the card and so forth. By the time we've finished up over the years, I'm doing a day's worth of training for the new recruits, including for their significant others. They get benefits from bringing a significant other program. Families are critical in learning about what are their resources, because if you give a recruit a pamphlet like this and say, take this home and show your family, it goes right into the garbage. They do not take it home to their families. So they invite them there. Dr. Violanti and I did research when I was doing my graduate work, and we had a questionnaire that we gave to both rank and file and supervision. And interesting enough, even though you had the typical, we hate the rank and file, we hate the supervisors, you know, all that stuff that goes on, that's normal. But they were asked the same question, but the answers to some questions were identical. Number one, if you had a choice of the following list of folks that you would choose to go to if you had a problem, who would it be? And the number one resource picked by both sides was a peer over a psychologist, EAP, external EAP, you know, all those resources that were available. We asked about education, and we know they hate education. They hate training because they have so much mandated training. And now you add one more thing on that they're overloaded. But they asked for training because one officer said, it would have been nice to know about what I'm going to do after being involved in a shooting before I was involved in the shooting, so that I didn't realize I'm going crazy and I'm nuts when I was responding normally to an abnormal event. And it would have been helpful if I was prepared. So now we prepare that not only for recruits, supervisors, and rank and file as an inoculation type of programming for them to keeping them well. And then they asked about family services. What about my wife? What about my husband? They don't understand this. And not every wife or significant other is made out to be in the law enforcement family. I have a brother who just retired, SWAT sniper lieutenant commander. I have two nephews on the job, and our family knows what that 2 a.m. knock on that door means. Something bad just happened. And my career, I take care of when something bad happens, but I'm eligible for that as well. So you have to look at who's taking care of the families, because they take care of the person who just involved in an incident or the ongoing stuff. We were looking at adding a day peer training in addition to our peer support training, and they started to do the top items. What are the top items to do for the peer that's a problem with our officers? Post-traumatic stress, trauma, pain management, domestic violence, suicide, family dysfunction. These are all the things that we're starting to look at. How do we address this? And then when you put a program together, you have to figure out what works well for your department, because what works well, an internal EAP may not work well and might need an external or an 800 number. Do they work? What about hotlines? It's what works best for your department which is the most important for supervisory to understand, because it's all about trust. If you don't have trust, and I find that they don't care about the letters next to your name, they care about, do you care about me and can I trust you? And they will begin to start to respond that way to being able to reaching out and getting the help that they need. When you start having questions about your own program, when my brother was working, he was involved in a critical incident and was taken on ambulance to emergency trauma unit. And I always asked myself, if something happened to my brother, would they take care of them? And I found the answer, which is no. So now I had to figure out, how am I going to take care of my brother moving forward? And you can have a program, but does it work? Are you utilizing it? You know, are you deploying these people who are going to go out and have a traumatic incident, such as we recently had the top shooting here in Buffalo, New York? Every resource was there, everything and everyone was there and took care of that situation. So when you start looking at programs, do you have a peer support program? Do you have in-house training in your academies? Those recruits, before they walk out the door, they're family members, so they know about us. So they can call and say, you know, my husband Sam's acting kind of like a knucklehead and he doesn't come home anymore and he's out drinking with the boys, because, you know, that peer support or that peer pressure starts to kick in. And then you look at the high rates of divorce that we have with our first responders. So are we taking care of our supervisors? Do they understand what to look for, what to identify, when to know when to make a phone call? And then also that very hard question, what if somebody says to you or answers your question, are you going to hurt yourself? And they said yes. And that's their biggest fear. please don't say yes, please don't say yes. Because now you have to do something about it, and it's one of your own. So train, where do I go? What do I do? And then who do they talk to? Because not everybody understands the culture of law enforcement. They don't understand what you go through. They don't understand why some things we think are funny and other people think are appalling, because these are all these defense mechanisms that we put together to get through our careers. So who do you speak to? So you have to locate those resources. The higher rates of, substance abuse and addictions, where they go for treatment when it comes to that. Going to a local hospital with people they've arrested, we found doesn't work. So we identify resources that provide those specialty programming that we're working with. So we work with management as well. Sometimes you bring management in, and no matter how good you are or how relevant the topic is, there are some managers who just don't buy into what we do. And sometimes we just say, well, if it'll save you money by putting them into a program and saving their career and not replacing them, would you do it? Sometimes that's an option that we work out, because management oftentimes are looking more to discipline rather than help the person that may need help. We've been through a bad couple of years with our officers. It's taken a toll. The suicide rates are up, that we are trying to work with education. We work with one-day conferences that we bring in all guest speakers, similar to Roger and the rest of you, that they can come in, because who else better can share than Roger or a Chris Prohat about your experience, because not many people get up there and speak from your heart because of the stigma that's attached, So we always emphasize hope. Hang on, the pain will end. We always end with hope. Hang on, because that pain will end. And what do we have to do? And where do we have to get you to get you the help that you need, so that we can change the direction and where this is going? Because we're saving lives, we're saving families, and we're saving careers.
And Ms. Goss, is your organization also on the West Coast as well? I know you do a lot on the East Coast, New York area. Is it also on the West Coast?
We respond to any request. I had worked with California State Corrections Officers Association, and we had come with our team of speakers, like with Dr. Violante, et cetera. And we did do a lot of work out there with the CCPO out there. So if you're interested in what we're doing, or any of the training or one-day conferences or symposiums we put together, we will definitely respond.
Thank you for that. And you said something that I wrote down about dealing with the recruits, and then you mentioned their significant others, and that's really important, because we also know that it's not just the recruits or the officer. They have families, they have friends and coworkers. And that brings me to actually Mr. Asante, because he deals with cops, and cops has so many different programs, not only for, line of duty death that deals with their spouses, but there are also programs for their children, for coworkers, for parents. And COPS is also a program that is trusted, that people have heard about. So as we segue to Mr. Asante, I wanted to know more about the national conference that you do of law enforcement, wellness, and trauma, because that's really important that we know about the different resources that COPS offer.
Yes, thank you. And it's really nice to be with everybody here. And our national conference on law enforcement, wellness, and trauma is going to be November 4th through the 6th in Dallas, Texas. And, Roger is going to be there with Dr. Renee Thornton that he's been talking about. He will be one of the breakout speakers with Dr. Thornton. So we're really excited to have him there. But this conference is for active and retired officers to come and be with other active and retired officers, mental health professionals, dispatchers, all those that work in law enforcement, and be able to be in a safe space and talk about wellness and trauma. We're going to have classes on suicide. We'll have classes on PTSD. I heard it was mentioned EMDR. That is a therapy that we have seen great results with. And there are lots of great different therapies like EMDR. We see amazing results where people can get trauma that is in the front of their brain, and with a trained therapist that teaches and goes through that therapy with them, they can reprocess that trauma and move it to the correct part of their brain. So that way it's not there on the front of their thoughts all the time. And it helps them, it doesn't erase any trauma. It just helps the brain, it helps the officer be able to process the trauma differently. So that way they can do their job better. And so that's what we do at this national conference. It is for officers and significant others. We'll have classes. We're going to have classes on about cop kids, how to talk to your kids and take off your badge when you go home. We have officers in the room here, and we know how hard, and deputies and sheriffs in the room, you know how hard it is to go home and to not be a deputy, to not be the sheriff, to not be an officer. Sometimes we forget that our family is our family, and it's okay to go home and to be a regular citizen at that point. And so we're going to teach classes on that. We'll have classes on financial, on how to, you know, we're talking about stress, and a lot of stress can come from things in the home. It can come from their paycheck or their checking account. And we want to give officers all the resources on wellness and trauma and help them be able to manage their professional life and their personal life. So that way the trauma and all of that comes with it doesn't start to take a hold of them. And so the national conference is a 3-day event, and it's amazing. We're going to have Dr. Gordon Eden is going to be our keynote speaker. Many of you know Dr. Graham. We're going to have Gordon Graham there as our keynote speaker, and he's the founder of Lexipol, and he does, you know, so much training. We all have taken the Lexipol trainings, and, you know, he's going to be there and talk about risk management and try to help officers stay out of risky situations. So that way they can better prepare themselves and stay safe while they're on the job. And so, you know, we're excited to let all of you know about this national conference. We hope that you will register for it. You know, the registration deadline is in October. But not only that, we also have our Traumas of Law Enforcement training. And our Traumas of Law Enforcement training is our signature training here at Concerns of Police Survivors. We travel to 9 different regions each year, and we do a regional training on stress and trauma. We spend a whole day on stress and trauma, a whole day on line of duty death, and the last day we spend on police suicide. And hearing the others talk about trauma, it is the cumulative trauma, that officer that goes to the domestic violence call, and then they go and do CPR on a baby, and then go do a traffic stop. You do that 3 times a week for 20, 25 years. That cumulative trauma is built up. And a lot of people say, well, I didn't go to a 9/11 type event, or I didn't go to a mass shooting. I should be okay. Well, that's what we try to do with the Traumas of Law Enforcement training, and let them know that the everyday calls you take, that cumulative trauma is starting to build up. And we want to make sure we can get to the officer before the officer gets to themselves. And so we talk to them plainly with other officers, with law enforcement clinicians, and we help them there. We bring our support service team with us. So it would be negligent of us to talk about trigger topics and not have peers or clinicians or support service team there that they can talk to. And they're in a safe space outside of the department. We are there, and there's free confidential therapy right there on site that they can talk to. And I heard Cindy talking about it. We don't want to talk to the EAP. We're scared we're going to lose our job, and we understand that. And when they come into our TLE, Traumas of Law Enforcement training, they realize they're in a safe space, and none of that comes back to me. I just find out how many contacts they make, but I don't know any of that. But we do know, because we hear back from them later, that we're saving lives because of this Traumas of Law Enforcement training. The last day of the training is police suicide, and we bring a survivor from our sister our sister company, Survivors of Blue Suicide, they come and they tell about their survivor journey, how their officer had died by suicide. And having that survivor there to talk about that, what they realize is it breaks the stigma of suicide. A lot of people think that an officer wants to get out or is killing himself because for selfish reasons. And what we have found that that is not the case. When this survivor of Blue Suicide is sitting there and they tell us the story of their officer who died by suicide, a lot of times what we see is there's not tears when they're telling their journey of their officer who died by suicide. And what we realize and what they explain is, I'm not crying now. I was crying for the last 5 years trying to save his life. I've been grieving him while he was alive. He's not here. I am hurt. But the grieving process had happened. Concerns of police survivors, we deal with grief because we work with the families of officers who have died in the line of duty. And died, most times when they die in the line of duty, it's sudden. Most officers that die in the line of duty, it's a sudden event. And when we see grief in those areas, a lot of times we will see the grief at that point. And grief, we all know, comes in different stages. But what we see with police suicide, a lot of times, those spouses have been fighting, and those family members and those coworkers at times were fighting to save their life. And a lot of times when they're not here anymore, it's not that they aren't affected by it, they are. But they had been trying and trying for so long. Now they're able to now tell when they come to our training and tell the others about their officer and how right now we need to take this moment right now. Let's try to save them for one more day. We save them for one more day, we may save their life.
Thank you for that, Mr. Asante. So much information. I know COPS does so much. And if I'm not mistaken, it's in different regions. Like I know for us in the San Francisco region, we have our own, there's a region here. You said there's 9 different regions all over the United States?
We do the training, we split the country up into 9 regions and we do one training in each region. We just were in the Midwest region last week, or about a week and a half ago, in Omaha, Nebraska, and we're leaving this Sunday for Eugene, Oregon to go there for that region's TLE. Anybody can attend, any law enforcement peace officer can attend these trainings. This training is free. Let me make sure I say that it is a free training. It is funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance, U.S. Department of Justice. It is a free training. Up to 200 seats are available at each of these regional trainings. And what we see, Sheriff Carter, is once we leave one location, we always see at the next location we go to, we're going to see people from the Nebraska region, the Midwest region in Oregon, because the officers are going to go back and tell everybody about, oh my gosh, that training was amazing and it saved my life. And then that department is going to send them to the next place and chase us down. You don't have to stay in your region. You can go to any region, and this is a free training.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned a little buzzword there, or you said the Bureau of Justice Assistance, BJA, who gives this assistance to you all so that all of these wonderful resources can be made available. So that segued me to Ms. Meter here, who is the Senior Policy Advisor with BJA. And I want to hear more about all of these different resources and how it is possible that we are getting this for free, and other resources and grants that may be made possible under your tutelage.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheriff Carter. And first, I just want to say thank you for having me here. It really is a great pleasure. And I want to thank Noble for inviting us to speak and for seeing the importance in having a conversation about law enforcement suicide. As Assistant Sheriff Carter mentioned earlier, my name is Deborah Meter, and I am a Senior Policy Advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. There I have led the Valor Officer Safety and Wellness Initiative since its inception in 2010. And I can say without a doubt that law enforcement wellness and safety has been and will continue to be a priority for BJA and for the department and for the administration. Law enforcement wellness and suicide prevention is really near and dear to my heart. As a former Montgomery County, Maryland police officer, as it is to BJA's director, Carlton Moore, who was the executive director of Ohio's Office of Criminal Justice Services. There, he made great strides in implementing programs within the state to strengthen officer safety and wellness. And again, this program is in great hands. It also has, as my supervisor, Associate Deputy Director Vince Davenport, who retired as a division commander within the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. And I say all of this because I think it's really important for you all to know that although these are programs and resources that are being provided through the federal government, they are being led by people who understand, people who have worn the shoes, who have worn that duty belt and that vest. And so we understand intimately the challenges, the stressors, and the danger that is faced within law enforcement every single day. We are really in a crisis as it relates to the number of officers we lose in this honorable profession each year. It's no secret where we are and the magnitude and the urgency of the state. The numbers really do reflect the impact and the urgency for actions. According to Blue Health, we lost 182 officers to suicide last year. 182 that we know of, 182. That means we lose more officers to suicide than to assaults and on-duty traffic accidents combined. Let me say that again. We lose more officers to suicide than to assaults and on-duty traffic accidents combined. And please note that this doesn't take into account the hundreds of officers who attempted suicide and survived, or the officers who are struggling and have suicidal thoughts. Absolutely is this a crisis. These facts alone should really mandate a call to action on the part of our profession to provide meaningful support and resources to law enforcement, and that is something that we are trying to do. So let me take a couple of steps back. And 2,400 years ago, Plato said, "It does not matter if the masons and the cobblers fail to do their jobs well, but if the guardians fail, the democracy will crumble." And you all are today's guardians, and we cannot fail. In a study by John Violante and others in the field of health, their research revealed that the life expectancy of police in comparison to the general public in the US is 22 years less. That is staggering. We have to reverse this trend now. Another study published in 2010 found that police officers are particularly vulnerable to stress and suicide, facing an average of 3 traumatic experiences for every 6 months of service. I dare say that probably is a higher number. These officers dealt with symptoms such as nightmares, aggression, flashbacks of the traumatic event. This really is the perfect storm for a dangerous cycle. The continuous stress of the profession and the symptoms brought on by past traumas can really lead to poor sleep, anxiety, depression, and increased risk to suicide. This cycle, I believe, is something that Chief Perry is going to be talking about, so I'm not going to go into detail about it, but it's something that we really focus on within our Safe Leo program. So for all of these reasons, BJA really has committed to working to address officer stress, trauma, wellness, resiliency, and safety, the entire gamut. We, through our Valor Initiative, are focused on making sure that we bring you all training, technical assistance, and resources at no cost to you and to your agencies. Our goal really is to provide you with the tools and the skills to increase your safety and wellness so that you can enjoy a long, rewarding, safe, and fruitful career. And you can do the same through your retirement. So let me give you a quick high-level overview of what BJA through Valor has to offer. Again, at no cost to you, we come to you. First is our National Consortium on Preventing Law Enforcement Suicide. This is a body of national experts convened in partnership with the International Association of Chiefs of Police to study really and discuss gaps and solutions to emerging challenges and successes of the field in addressing mental health for law enforcement with the goal of preventing future officer suicides. The consortium really is a very active body. We just recently met a couple of weeks ago here in the Washington, D.C. area. It has produced issue flyers, briefs, resources on messaging about suicide prevention, as well as a toolkit for law enforcement agencies and officers. That toolkit includes publications on peer support, on postvention, and also provides a comprehensive framework, taking a look at the state of law enforcement suicide. And these items are all available to download for free. You can get to the link through our Valor Officer Safety and Wellness page on BJA's website. I won't speak too much about our next program, our National Suicide Awareness for Law Enforcement Officers program, which is also known as SafeLEO, because I know that Chief Perry will go into greater detail on SafeLEO. But this is a training and technical assistance program that is in partnership with the Institute for Intergovernmental Research, also known as IIR. And through this work, we provide training and technical assistance and resources throughout the country. We come to you focused on raising awareness, education, and preventing law enforcement suicide. Again, I'll leave the details to Chief Perry. Valor has several other programs that address officer wellness and safety. The many topics that make that up, diet, exercise, trust, mindfulness, all of these programs, when brought together, work to strengthen an officer and an agency's foundation to be more resilient. So I'm going to, I know I'm getting close on my time, so I'm just going to quickly mention a few others.
You have time, Ms. Meter.
Okay, that deal more comprehensively on officer wellness, safety. So let's see. Our Valor program. Our Valor program is BJA's flagship officer safety and wellness program. It provides in-person, virtual, and online training and technical assistance, again, at no cost, that focuses on recognizing indicators of dangerous situations, applying diffusing techniques, implementing casualty care and rescue tactics. We also talk about professional policing standards and improving wellness and resilience. And this program, this flagship program, is also brought in partnership with the Institute for Intergovernmental Research. We have our Innovative Approaches to Strengthening Officer Wellness program, which focuses on wellness only, really. It's just on wellness, and has developed, among other resources, a comprehensive officer safety and wellness agency assessment tool and an action planning roadmap that assists agencies in implementing wellness programs within their department. It is a guide that you can have in your hand that goes from, okay, you want to implement a wellness program, this is how you start. These are the different steps that you have to take. There are exercises in there to help the agency evaluate really where they are within their activities of implementing a wellness program. So this planning, this action planning roadmap is really, really a useful piece. We also have a law enforcement agency and officer resilience training program that delivers in-person and virtual resiliency concepts training to law enforcement. The goal is to build more resilient officers and to teach them that resilience is something that can be built. It's not something that you have or don't have. It's something that you can develop and strengthen within yourself. So we give them information to and enhance their knowledge and skills and resiliency so that they can really better deal with the many day-to-day challenges and stressors they face. So please, again, I welcome you to visit our website and to see the other programs that we have available there. As we have developed these programs, we have made sure to take a really close look at and to examine how we can best provide these trainings and resources in a way that resonate and will make a difference. So what makes our training different? Our goal really is to provide a culture change, to bring a culture change to an agency. With culture change, speaking about wellness and suicide and mental health should become a part of an agency and an officer's daily language, daily conversations. All of our programs and resources really are founded on research and promising practices that are gathered from the field. We take all of this information and examine it to create programs that address today's issues and that do so in a way that really speaks to today's officers and what they're facing. So we provide training that is interactive, it's innovative. We hold conversations. It's based on adult learning concepts. Gone are the days of PowerPoints and instructors who read line by line. That's not what our trainings do. As I said, it involves conversations and really are thought-provoking for those participants. It makes them reflect on the topics being discussed and how those topics affect them. Participants leave with a handbook, a workbook that provides them practical skills and tools that they can use when they go back to their departments.
I'm sorry, Ms. Reed, is this something that individual officers, deputies, law enforcement, they can sign up for on their own, or oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. They can sign up on their own. But to be effective, we really continue to reach out to these officers after they leave one of our trainings. We've learned that parachuting in and doing a training, doing one of those one and done engagements really isn't the way. We build relationships with these officers, with these individuals and these agencies, and we provide regular communications to them, reinforcement messages, reminders of key concepts that we've taught. Our goal is to build a lasting relationship where they know that if they need assistance, technical assistance with something, they can come to BJA, they can come to our different Valor programs and request that assistance and get it at no cost.
Wow, that's amazing.
We also have hybrid training for agencies and officers who can't come to training in person. We have hybrid trainings for them. So really we try to take a look at what the need is in the field and make sure that we are hitting that need.
No, I'm hearing from all of you guys that it has to be more than just the one and done. I heard that from Roger as well with the 8 steps. Like, there has to be longevity, there has to be time and effort and patience put into all of these programs. And for me as a law enforcement professional, it is great to hear all of this information, because it's like going into the community. You just can't go one day and it solved our relationship. It takes time. And with our officers, we have to put the time and the effort into it so that they are resilient, because everyone will have the triggers. I'm hearing that we all have experiences, whether we know it or not. Now we need to understand we have them. What can we do to help ourselves? And what can I do as a law enforcement professional to help the people that are working side by side me and those who are under me? Which brings me to retired Chief David Perry. I could not read all of this information that he had, but you do have to understand with retired Chief Perry that he has been a chief, if I'm not mistaken, at the age of 26, at 26 years old. Chief Perry was selected as the Chief of Police and Director of Public Safety at Albany State University in Georgia. It's important to know that he has been in law enforcement for a very long period of time. And so he sees this as we would see it in law enforcement. He understands as being the new officer, and he understands as the chief. And so you're with Safe Leo now. We've heard that a couple of times, this program. So we want to know, what is this program about? And then this cycle of wellness that we're hearing about.
Well, Assistant Sheriff Carter, thank you so much. Thank Noble for this opportunity, but I have to walk backwards and thank Roger for sharing his journey and what we call courageous vulnerability, because what he shared gives power and voice to those thousands of other officers who may be in the same place or in a similar place. And as Deborah knows, we say it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. So Roger set the table. It's almost like y'all put all this food on the table for me, and I gotta pass around the plates and make these dots connect. But you and Mr. Asante hit on a key point. You said that you compartmentalized incidents, Roger, over a period of time. Mr. Asante, you used the word cumulative trauma, right? And what we say in the Safe Leo program is that all those things that you have put down in the basement, they're not laying dormant. Cindy, they are lifting weights, they are bench pressing, they are getting ready to come out at a time when you least expect it, or during some type of moment when a song, a smell, a memory, something takes you back to that moment. You have that flashback and you're not ready to deal with the downpour of emotions. And so I want to thank you both for kind of setting me up for what I'm going to talk about briefly. And really what I want to focus on, Assistant Sheriff Carter, is that the importance of breaking the law enforcement generational stigma is vital to the success of our efforts in this profession, right? We've all been built with beliefs and thoughts and things associated with our generations. Come on, nod with me, right? Because we have viewers on, and all of you, I'm sizing you up for your generation. We have viewers that grew up during a time when you heard this saying in your house. Cindy, you heard this saying, what happens in this house stays in this house. I heard you, I saw your lips moving, and we have carried that same thought process and that same, mindset to the workplace. We are a part of our generation. We're built that way. So just think about the mindsets of a generation, think about our profession. And now when many of us enter this honorable profession, we carry those same thoughts with those generations with us. And our only coping mechanisms were shared by people who really cared about us in our profession. Here's their coping mechanisms, Roger. Tell me if I'm wrong, but if something bad happened, if we saw a dangerous scene, if we were even scared about that open door that we had to go clear that room by ourselves, someone came to us and said, hey, how you doing? And we say, all right, we're okay. And for the most part, they say, rub some dirt on it, suck it up, or let's go to choir practice and then we'll unwind at choir practice and we'll get through this together, right? We didn't hear anyone say, Perry, it's okay to be bothered by those 3 fatalities that you investigated within, 3 weeks time, seeing those children, seeing those family members hurt. We didn't hear that, because if you came forward, like you said, we would be looked upon, unfavorably. Something would be wrong with Perry for coming forward and saying, I'm dealing with those visions and those sounds and those smells. So, add on top of that stigma from our profession, now stack on just a little bit about the burdens of dealing with mental health and that stigma in our communities of color. We're already dealing with generational stuff. We're already dealing with profession. And now you add on another layer, because we're talking about Noble, right? Another layer of a community who has a hard time dealing with and talking about mental health and wellness. And so that's a trifecta. That's a stack of things that are against us. So thankfully, we're evolving. And I'm going to call those listeners out. I'm going to call out millennials and Gen Z, because they are leading the way in helping us understand it's okay to talk about your feelings. It's okay to say what's on your mind, because that's how they've been built. Many of us are parents, and we used to ask that generation, what do you want to eat? Where you want to go? And so now they don't have a problem in our workplace talking about how they feel and what they want to do. And they definitely don't have problems asking for time off or skipping that overtime detail, because they believe in investing in themselves. So, because baby boomer and Generation X parents have given them that voice, we as leaders who are from different generations have to understand that and embrace it. But Deborah led on to a very important cycle that I just want to walk through very briefly, and maybe ties together what Roger mentioned. It ties together what Cindy discussed, and a little bit of what Asante tries to address. And those are some of the cycles that our men and women find themselves in: the cycle of despair, and the cycle of really destruction, where it puts them in a bad situation to not be able to cope with these situations in a healthy way. And so I've shared my screen. I'm sharing what we use in our training courses called the cycle of despair. And I'm just going to walk through just for a couple of minutes and show you what it looks like, what Roger mentioned, but maybe visualize it so in a way that will help our viewers understand when we come to you for this in-person training, when we do something online, as Deborah said, it's interactive. We are not going to just lecture, but we want to also provide tools and visual aids. And so the realities of the job are that, you know, we work in a very tough field. You heard the call that Roger was exposed to that, you know, he shared those thoughts about. But typically when we ask officers, how are they doing? They'll say, I'm fine. Just like many of you will say, if someone asks you, how are you doing? You'll say, I'm fine, I'm good. When in reality, you may not be completely fine. We know we're not paid like, you know, NBA stars. We know we work long hours. We have dangers, high liability. All these things are the realities of the job. The effects are strains on our relationship. Roger talked about financial challenges. Mr. Asante is going to give webinars and help at his conference on financial challenges, which is a big one. But the health habits and the lack of sleep and the other poor coping mechanisms are also a part of the effects of the job. And we typically only self-isolate with people who we know are in the field. All of that equals stress. And if we don't deal with stress in the right way, it leads us to cope in an unhealthy way. We internalize our emotions, we overwork, we consume alcohol or other things that are not healthy for us. And again, that self-isolation puts us in the consequences of unhealthy coping. Broken relationships, that's a big one. Those health problems that go unchecked, not going to get a physical, not dealing with that ailing knee sprain that we had months ago. Now we're in pain. We're taking too much medicine. We're trying to drink to rest and sleep. That adds to frustration. Deborah knows that adds to job troubles. And then those start to really visualize in terms of a change in behavior for that officer. And then that cycle literally continues. That's why we call it, you know, this cycle of despair. Now we're in a cycle of stress where the officers feel hopelessness, they feel psychological pain, and it does lead to someone considering or trying to complete suicide. But we don't want that conversation to stop there, Assistant Sheriff Carter. We want to be able to share with our audience that there is a cycle of health and wellness that really embodies what we should be, you know, reaching for in our honorable profession. You heard the 22-year life expectancy. Some of you did the math, right? If we retire at 55 and then we get this retirement check, the numbers for the return on our investment are not, they're just not right. The math doesn't add up to show the investment that we put into this honorable profession. And so in our cycle of health and wellness, our cycle of health and resiliency, we like to show that the realities of the job, they don't change. The effects of the job will still be there. We will still have to work holidays. We will still have to work midnight shift. We will still be put in some very dangerous or difficult situations. But how we deal with those situations, because of resiliency, because of those positive strategies, we are able to mitigate those levels of stress and not let those things or those stressors be in the basement working out. We've implemented health and wellness, mindfulness, those positive proactive strategies that Deborah mentioned. And now we are treating medical issues. We are using these no-cost resources for posters to put around in departments. We are talking about the importance of sleep. We are listening and watching webinars and things that help us, you know, manage some of the awful things that we see in this profession. And guess what? We should be bothered by some of the awful things we see. We shouldn't walk around and hold that like a badge of honor, like, oh, well, it didn't bother me. It should bother you. To see some of the things that we see on a daily basis should bother our men and women. And so using mindfulness techniques, talking to a supervisor who is ready and prepared to have that conversation or just listen is vital. The worst thing that can happen is someone gets that courage up, goes to that supervisor, and now they're blown off like, Roger, and I dealt with 5 of those, you know, almost minimizing that moment when you have just garnered all that encouragement and strength to come forward and the supervisor is not prepared. That's where those supervisor and leader and manager classes come in for Safe Leo. And then there's a different outlook. There's an optimistic outlook that gives people sustainable physical health, sustainable mental health, sustainable spiritual health. And when I say spiritual health, we're not talking about church. We're not passing out Bibles because, you know, when you say spiritual, some people think they start getting spooky on us. Spiritual means You could go on a hike. Spiritual means coming to a realization that you have a higher, calling and thought process because you connect back to your why. And then ultimately you have good job satisfaction. Assistant Sheriff Carter, don't you want to recruit people that are following this model? Don't you want to have good retention? Are many of our agencies around the country struggling to keep people within their agencies? Absolutely. So that's the cycle of health and wellness. Then that results in positive outlooks, good balance, having a sense of purpose, having a sense of autonomy, and knowing that every interaction matters when you're dealing with people and treating them with respect. And then if you do pass on, you pass on from natural causes, you pass on from old age, and you got that mailbox money a lot longer than that 22-year life expectancy that we first mentioned. And so I just want to lay out breaking those generational stigmas of how we see mental health is important, and visualizing and understanding that there is a cycle of illness that some of our men and women are in right now. All of us on this Zoom can visualize some people that we've either worked with or currently are working with who, may find themselves in that cycle of despair. But this is where we want to keep them as we move forward. So I'm going to pause there. I know you may have a few more questions as we go forward, but I just wanted to lay that out for our viewers.
No, thank you for that, Chief Perry. I was trying to take notes. Is that PowerPoint that you have available on Safe Leo or somewhere where people can go back and refer to that?
That is absolutely available, but there's a small hook. There's a hook because I didn't go into the level of classes that we come to your agency and provide. But if your agency member attends at least one Safe Leo class, that makes them eligible to attend the Train the Trainer course. And once they attend the Train the Trainer course and successfully complete it with your leadership, blessing as the leader, they get everything. They get the entire PowerPoint. They get access to all the materials. We hold nothing back because we want nothing more but to be a force multiplier for this very important information that needs to be out to men and women in our profession.
Is this like a 40-hour trainer? As a law enforcement professional, I think all of us online, whoever our guests are, ears perked up because this information is so important. All the stress, all the critical incidents that we see, the crises, this is the type of stuff that we need for our agencies, our departments, whether it's dispatchers, firefighters, police, deputies. This is the kind of information that we need. And what I'm hearing from you is not only are you willing to share that, but also train people so that we leave our agencies knowing that someone else behind us can come right in and continue the work that we started with wellness, which is so important. So
Yep.
is this like a week-long program for Train the Trainer or?
No, not week long. Let me just go through the quick suite of trainings and maybe that will answer your questions. We would like to start with the executives because we need buy-in. Ms. Meter said that, and she's 200% accurate, that anyone can sign up for Valor, get a Safe Leo account. We want them to attend training and have access to those resources. But when we want to change culture and we want to change the mindset within an entire agency, we like to do a 2-hour executive level training where we come in, show them the concepts that will be shared with the men and women in their agency, talk about the resources, and then the next 2 levels and layers really get to the meat of their organization. So we start with the executive, that's a 2-hour block, overwhelming with information, but very powerful. And then that creates the buy-in. Then we come back with the supervisor, the manager, the mid-level. And we know that that sergeant who has to hear those conversations, we know that that mid-level manager is the point of contact where they can observe behaviors, they can make an instrumental difference and really hopefully steer someone in the right direction when it comes to help and resources. So we have to get to that mid-level. That's an 8-hour class that we conduct in person. We also have a virtual portion that's available. So 8 hours for that session. And then we come back with the third offering, and that's the line officer. That's just the deputy, the officer, the communications supervisor or dispatcher, you name it, that level where we want them to know we understand where you are, we understand where you may find yourselves, but there is hope. There is a bright light at the end of the tunnel, like Roger shared. And now the whole level, every level within the organization now has a full comprehension of the resources, the training, and now the Train the Trainer is open to anyone who's attended any one of those 3 classes that I mentioned. So Deborah, if I left something out, let me know. So 8 hours for the line officer, 8 hours for the mid-level manager, supervisor, and 2 hours for that executive, because we need you to be a champion. We want you putting mental health and wellness on your bi-weekly agenda when you have command staff meetings and start talking about, physical health challenges. We want you to send out messages to say, I walked my 5 miles today. Who's in? Who else is doing that? Sending screenshots of your iWatch, challenging men and women in your agency to do the same. So that's where we are.
No, Chief Perry, you're just making me so elated right now, because what we talked about in the beginning is we understand that there are issues, there's concerns, that there's the stigma of, being suicide awareness and what that all entails. But there are ways that we can take care of ourselves, and there are ways in law enforcement as professionals that we can take care of our officers and our deputies. To the word resilience continues to outshine, and this is what we want, because we all have traumatic experiences, whether they are in this office, on the street, or at home, and all of you are giving us ways on how to cope with that. And I really want to kind of go back to Roger, who started this whole thing off, because with Pathfinders and navigating adversity, as I told you before, when they came to the sheriff's office, there was absolute resistance of navigating adversity, because you mentioned, Chief Perry, there was this little caveat on spiritual or something like that, and people freaked out thinking that we were trying to sign them up for something. And Roger and Renee came in and they were committed, and all of you guys I'm hearing the commitment and the passion, and they turned our thinking, because as someone mentioned, cultural, that core there, they turned our thinking around to understand the whole thing was important. All these 8 steps, fitness, and the spiritual part of it was important. And so I wanted Roger to kind of share really get a little bit more deeper into what one of the steps or some of the steps of navigating adversity, because I don't think you talked about that. And then if it's available on both coasts, because I know we're in California, but if someone in New York or Texas wanted to be a part of it, are they able to?
Thank you. Yeah, there's a couple of things, there's one thing I want to mention that can also get the attention of folks in the administration who might be a little bit resistant to the training. And that is the potential liabilities that are coming our way. And I'm sure that at the COPS conference in Dallas, Gordon Graham will probably talk about this, because Gordon Graham is the predictable is preventable guy. And from a risk management perspective, though, we now have legislation saying that suicide is going to be considered an in the line of duty death. So it is not a hard juxtaposition to say that the survivors of a police suicide wouldn't file a lawsuit against an agency who is not doing scientifically validated training to show that we're addressing these issues. So, from a liability perspective, if this is a lower priority in the agency because of all the other fires you're putting out, do consider that this liability is coming. That is an absolute that's on the horizon. So I felt it was important to mention that. As far as Pathfinder resilience, we'll go anywhere in the world where we're needed. East Coast, West Coast, North America, across the continents, whatever. We're happy to support anywhere that is having a need. So that's an absolute. We'll go wherever we're needed. The 8 pillars of wellness, we mentioned spiritual, and this is the one that really gets people fired up, right? Like, oh goodness, you're not going to preach to us, are you? As Chief Perry said, we're going to hand out Bibles. No, it's not like that. But you bring up something incredibly important, and Chief Perry did a good job of highlighting this. We think of spirituality as having an absolute value system. In other words, something that is beyond the self. That could be a higher power. That could be a particular religion. Or maybe I believe so deeply in the tenets of the United States Constitution that is my absolute value system, my why to get up and go do my job to the best of my ability every day. If we don't have something that anchors us, that is beyond the self, then we take it all on. And what we know is the people who do that cannot sustain that. That is a pathway that is going to lead to trouble down the road. So when we look at things like spirituality, we try to dispel this idea that we're preaching a certain ideology, and that in fact, we're saying, find a powerful why that you can hang your hat on every single day. The other pillars of wellness have been mentioned too. For example, financial capital. This is one of the things that gets people into so much trouble because they have never had anybody guide them in how to set up their finances. And we know what it's all like. You come on the job and you're buying the big truck and the boat and all the toys. And then suddenly you're going, oh my God, I have to work overtime just to make my bills. And that gets us in trouble. And then there's emotional capital and other ways that we want to raise our bar across the board. So there isn't any one particular area that's more important than another. It is a combination, a completion of all these things that gives us a rock solid foundation. The other thing that we have found very important, I've heard this mentioned by several people on this distinguished panel. Gosh, it's an honor to be here with such a high performing group, I have to tell you. One of the things that we also do is we focus on the loved ones. So we also have a course that is similar to what the officers go through, but it is designed for the loved ones of the officers, and they can go through it simultaneously so that everybody in their personal life is also on the same page. And, you know, many of you mentioned that we have to have the admin walking the talk. This is often where the ball gets dropped, where the administration says, hey, we've got this great program. We want you to do it. And they themselves are more falling into that camp of do as I say, not as I do. And friends, you're all in leadership. Leadership means we have to set the bar very high. We have to live that truth completely. And we have to be on board, because unless we do that, we cannot come together and create true behavioral change on the cultural level within the organization.
Well, thank you for that, Roger. Yeah, you guys are all hitting like on these same components. I'm hearing, of course, fitness, financial. Who would have thought that financial is a part of this, right? And each of you separate, different experiences, different parts of the world are talking the same language, which is important to us as law enforcement professionals, because it means that it's touching no matter where you are, who you are, it's touching all of us. And so it's important that we listen and really come together with wellness. I know that our time is coming up. I'm looking at our time here. I do not see any questions on here. Okay, so what I want to do is give each of you, let's say no more, I'm gonna shut it down now, just your final thoughts on what you would want someone like me, a law enforcement executive, like you just said, Roger, what should I know, or what should one of the officers know? Either or, just give us something to leave with as we close down. And I'm going to start with Ms. Goss.
I would say the health and wellness of your department reflects the health and wellness of management of this department, and how management handles this, accepts this, becomes responsible for their people, really truly responsible and caring. That emulates down into its rank and file and into their supervision. And so it's important that the supervision sets the tone. The commander in chief sets the tone. And when they support something, it'll carry down. And like we say in the academy, the people we go through the academies now learn differently, not just suck it up buttercup anymore. But what happens is they become supervision eventually, and they start taking this mindset forward, which is important. So as the older people retire and these new people come in with a different mindset, they're the ones that are making that cultural change. So basically, if your management supports it, your members will be supported as well.
Thank you for that. Starts at the top. Roger?
Well, let me just conclude with this. Creating a culture of wellness, it's not a pipe dream. It's doable even in the most challenged and toxic organizations. The key to success is you, leaders watching this webinar, the people who can create cultural change. And every person on this distinguished panel, we're ready to serve you. So reach out, learn more, and find what's going to fit in your organization and do everything you can to implement that. Time is of the essence. We can't wait anymore. We've got to lead, and we have to lead strongly and boldly. And that's the message I would share with you.
Thank you for that. Ms. Meter?
Oh boy, I think this is going to sound really similar to what everyone else is saying, but exactly. I agree with both Roger and Cindy. First of all, you need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, because if a well executive, a healthy executive, will see the benefits and will understand and be able to really work to make sure that there is a culture change within your agency. So executives carry a lot of strain and stress and different challenges. So we understand that, and we want to make sure you are taking care of yourselves, and then so that you can then help support your agency and take care of those below you. I cannot stress enough the importance of making sure that you know the resources that are out there and that you reach out. Please reach out to me, reach out to Chief Perry, reach out to anyone at BJA. We are here to help you to really implement and start that culture change within your agencies, and provide you with customized assistance to do that. So know that you are not alone, and that we are here to do whatever we possibly can for you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Asante?
Yes, and thank you everybody for allowing me to be part of this. Thank you to Noble. And right now, if I was to leave here and go and work out and lay on a bench, do a bench press, and it was my max out day, I would not go there by myself and max out. I'm going to hold on to that bar. And as I'm lifting it up, I'm going to be 1, 2, 3. I'm going to get to go continue lifting it up. At some point, I'm not going to be able to lift it anymore. And it's not because I don't want to hold on. I am trying with everything I have. And if I let go of that, it's going to crush me and it could kill me. But that's why we have someone standing behind us who's sitting there. Hey, I'm right here. I'm going to help you. And they're going to help lift it up. So I'm telling everybody that's listening, and it's okay to ask for help. We all have been saying that, but each of us sitting there, we've all been in law enforcement, and those that are listening, ask that person, hey, I see you're about to max out today. I want to help you. I can listen. I'll listen. What can I do to help lift that burden off of you? That's what we need to do. I hope we each can remember that.
Oh my goodness, these are such great nuggets.
Mhm.
Chief Perry?
Thank you, Tanzanique. I will say Friedrich Nietzsche said, whoever fights monsters must take care that he does not become one in the process, because if you gaze into that abyss long enough, that abyss will gaze back at you, right? And so that's the work we're in. Safe Leo can help with developing an action plan specific for agencies and specific for individual officers. And we follow a blueprint that has proven to be research, sound, and based. And that's understanding the challenges, considering the solutions, and implementing best practices. You know, I want those agencies who stayed on and sacrificed this time to know having a plan before a tragedy strikes is vital. And I hope our viewers will take a look at our Safe Leo website. My hope is also that we help just one. If we reach just one tonight, then it was worth me missing Family Feud and all my other good shows tonight. This is very important.
Thank you, sir. And let me tell you, you reached 1. So you definitely have done that tonight. 2, I just want to say thank you to Chief Reddick, who allowed me to be the moderator today. I didn't say much about her. I think you all should Google her. She has 29 years of experience in CHP, the California Highway Patrol. She was the first woman that did many, many things at CHP, who held it down for over thousands of people and a multi-billion-dollar agency. And she's here with us. She has a wealth of information herself. I just want to thank her personally on this call here to say thank you for allowing me to be the moderator. And I am now going to turn this back over to you.
Yes, thank you for that, Sheriff Carter. Thank you. Thank you all. As I was sitting here, I had some prepared closing remarks, but my spirit was moved. So thank you so much for talking about our spiritual aspect and that higher calling and those values that we have that overlap us in our policing and public safety profession. And I was thinking about all the things that you were saying. You guys are a collaboration. You are a consortium of resources and options that people can use and have. That when I look back at when I was a cadet 34 years ago, when I was a cadet, it was suck it up, buttercup. There was none of this available. And so you are right. It's about communication. It's about courageous leadership. It's about how we motivate, how we inspire, how we create psychologically safe space for our employees, how we are present every day when we're at work to see people, to see them in their moments so that they can feel seen. And so I just cannot thank you all for the commitment that you have given. This is your life mission. And so we at Noble, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, we say thank you. We're glad that you are partners with us and that you were able to come on and share this information. And let me tell you, for everybody that stayed on and listening, and this is recorded, so it is still available for others, that they're not going away. This is a longstanding partnership for law enforcement and public safety. They are a resource that is for you, and they are doing scientific evidence-based research to support why you need to have this in your agencies and why we as individuals need to seek it. I am not like anyone else just because I rose to an executive level. I carry cumulative trauma to this day and did not know until I started educating myself. I started facing things that made me feel shameful, embarrassed. I was fearful. So you are like me and I am like you, and we are like all of us here. So again, I just want to say thank you so much and bless all of you this evening as you go home and catch Family Feud in your respective time zones. So thank you all for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you and God bless.
Yes. All right, everyone. Good night.